I'm Tom Edwards, EM3. I joined the Navy 3 days after my 19th birthday. In my case, that would have been February 5th, 1968. Went to basic training at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center, where I think the high temperature in the time I was there was somewhere between 5 and 10 below zero, and I went from there to Vietnam. Kind of a slight adjustment. Actually, after I left boot camp, I was in dry dock. The ship, the Krishna, was the ship I was on, and we were in dry dock in Yokosuka, Japan for a few months, retrofitting the ship and so forth, and getting it ready to take care of swift boat repair and maintenance, which we did. We got underway from Yokosuka and dropped anchor in Anthoy, and I was in Anthoy approximately 9 months. So my day-to-day operations, I was not a swift boat crew member. I was not on a swift boat. My job was to repair and maintain them when they came back from patrol. So during the course of the day, man, I would be on 2 or 3. So there's no one that I worked on, and I became a part of the Swift Boat Sailors Association in 2007, and it's a great outfit. Glad I'm a part of it. I'm one of the few maintenance and repair people that were almost exclusively, quite frankly, the sailors that are in the Swift Boat Sailors Association were on the tip of the spear. I was not. I was on the back of the handle. I maintained them and repaired them, so that was my involvement with them. Some of them, they would come back, had very obviously, they'd been in firefights and so forth, and you could tell when they came back from patrol, they'd been in some pretty serious combat. The longest nonstop run I had of working on a swift boat, I started at 11 a.m. and finished at 1 p.m. That would be 1 p.m. the next day. That would be 26 hours later, not 2. But when they came back, it was all hands on deck. If the ship had been through some pretty serious combat and so forth, and you needed to get it back up and running, it was time to hit the deck and hit it running. And I had some interesting experiences. One of the swift boats came back, and as you can imagine, in a combat zone, supplies were sketchy at best. And looked at some of the battery banks, and some of the battery posts had been in some pretty serious shape. You put them under enough stress and so forth. And I looked at one of these, and I did the electrolyte reading to make sure that the electrolyte inside the battery was still fine. And it was, but the post needed help, and we didn't have a large rack of batteries that we could draw from. And I looked at the deck, and there were a lot of 50 caliber machine guns on the deck, and I looked at one of those, and I thought, that looks like the same size as the battery post, and it was. So I hacksawed off the firing pin end of it, and I took, just like my barber, I took a little off the top, and then I put it on a grinding wheel, and one side of it was very, very thin. So then I tapped that over what was left of the battery post, got some solder, poured it in there, let it cool, took a hammer and chisel, and then peeled that away, and had a brand new battery post. And my commanding officer, I still remember this, he saw that and he laughed, and he said, well, that's one way to do it. So necessity really is the mother of invention, so we had to get pretty creative. And I've spoken with a lot of the crew members that were on swift boats, and this won't surprise you at all, the camaraderie was airtight. These guys were up against it, and they had each other's backs. Well, even though we were not on the tip of the spear, the camaraderie of among those of us that worked on them and repaired them and maintained them, we got along well. We were a tight bunch, so when they came in and they needed anything, we were on it, and we were on it now. And we took a lot of pride in that. We really did. We were an organized group, and in retrospect, and I'm sure that I remember this with clarity, I don't remember any arguments or disagreements, no yelling. That's pretty amazing under the circumstances that we were operating under. We were brothers in arms, and we knew it. So when they came in and it was time to get them up and running, we did it. And I can't tell you how many guys, even when they would come back from patrol, say, hey, I need a new voltage regulator, or I need new windshield wipers, or whatever. We took pride in keeping them up and running. They were incredibly reliable craft, and I didn't take the measurements, quite frankly, but if I would estimate, then the hull was a 1/4 inch thick of aluminum. So there were some pretty serious holes in this thing, and we cut that out with saws and so forth, obviously. And before we would put new plates in, you could see this exposed area, and I would say it's about 3 feet long, maybe 2.5 feet wide. There was a hole that size in it. Now, it was up near the deck, which I'm sure helped. If it was, down below the waterline, then I don't know, quite frankly, what their fate would have been. But that was my most vivid memory of one that came back with some pretty huge holes, and that was in the starboard side of that, as I recall. And windshields being shattered and so forth, that was extremely common, of windshields that look like, you know, they've got 100 spider webs on them. And some of the Swift boat crew members have told me that over time they put support bars, and I don't remember that, I don't remember ever seeing that, but they would put support bars were inserted behind the windshields, just one or two obviously, so your vision wouldn't be too blocked, but that would keep them from flexing so much and giving way and cracking and so forth. But a lot of the photos I have, a lot of the windows and so forth were very temporary. They were plywood, literally, so that there wouldn't be wind and so forth rippling through there. We had port and starboard duty every other day. So even when, if you were an electrician or a bosun mate or machine, whatever you did during the day, one day you'd have duty, the next day you would not, obviously, hence the name port and starboard. And when it was my turn for duty, I always had the same watch station. I was on the bow, and I had an ammunition box full of concussion grenades, and I had an M16. And the purpose for that was to keep any of the Viet Cong from swimming up to our ship and planting explosives. Now, when I threw concussion grenades over the side, it wasn't every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, very obvious, for obvious reasons. It was staggered. I'd throw one, and then maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, literally, I'd throw another one, and then maybe a half an hour. I didn't want the enemy maintaining any sort of a schedule and so forth. And there were a couple of nights I would yell out to the sampan fishing boats that were nearby. I'd yell for them in English, "Go away," and more often than not, that would work. If it didn't, I would squeeze off a few rounds in front of the bow. I didn't, you know, most of them were legitimate fishermen. I didn't want to injure anybody, I really didn't. But sure, it was a war zone. There was a war going on, and where I was at Antoy was, I believe, the largest POW station in Vietnam. So very obviously, the Viet Cong would have loved to have had a massive jailbreak kind of thing. So yeah, that concern was there. But as I say, for my day-to-day operations, I didn't have it, to the same level of combat and potential hazard that the Swift boat crew members had. Those of us that repaired them didn't face that daily. Although the Krishna did get underway 2 times at least that I can recall, possibly 3. We would physically get up and get underway and leave Anthoy, and we would shell, because there were 40 millimeters forward and aft, and 50 calibers both port and starboard. And we went up to kind of disrupt where the bad guys were getting settled in and so forth. But we didn't do that a lot. That happened 2 or 3 times with me, as I say. And we took, there was fire that came in and so forth. But over 9 months, that's not commensurate with what the Swift boat crew members had to endure.